proudly say that 45 years after JRD Tata founded PFI, we continue to be inspired by his vision for increased access to voluntary family planning services and the recognition of centrality of women for the prosperity of the community. I would like to share a quote from JRD Tata when he got the UN Population Award in 1992. He said, and I quote, "I have always believed that no real social change can occur in any society unless women are educated, self-reliant, and respected." Dr. Babatunde I've had the privilege of knowing him as an advisor, as a mentor, and a friend for many years. Babatunde is an inspiring global leader in public health, women's empowerment, young people, particularly focused on promoting human rights, including sexual and reproductive health and rights, as well as population and development. Since his appointment as the Executive Director of UNFPA in 2011, he has spearheaded efforts globally to advance the milestone consensus of ICPD, held in Cairo in 1994. He's also steering UNFPA's humanitarian action and efforts around eliminating gender-based violence and other harmful practices. Dr. Babatunde believes that humility is the key to engaging people and facilitating change. Babatunde's professional background is in health and medicine. Dr. Babatunde is a real doctor and not just a PhD doctor. He has extensive knowledge of the global and national frameworks and processes that are critical, having worked and served as Nigeria's Minister for Health and also as the Director General of Nigerian National Agency for the Control of HIV/AIDS, which coordinates all HIV work in the country. He currently co-chairs the Family Planning 2020 Reference Group along with Dr. Chris Elias, President Global Development Program, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and those of us who are part of the reference group still don't know the secret behind co-chair 1 and 2, but Babatunde is known now as co-chair 2, and I invite you to speak to us. Co-chair 1, sorry.
Thank you, Poonam. And let me start by saying I'm very humbled to actually having to give the 13th oration after Muttreja said. I think that that will go down in my biography as one of my highlights of my professional life. So distinguished guests, dear friends, and ladies and gentlemen, let me say good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be back in the beautiful city of New Delhi, and an honor to deliver the JRD Tata Memorial Oration. JRD Tata was a man of great vision. UNFPA, where I've had the privilege of working for the last 5 years. And at UNFPA, we aspire to deliver a world where every pregnancy is wanted, every childbirth is safe, and every young person's potential is fulfilled. Let me begin by thanking the Population Foundation of India. I was an advisor of the MacArthur Foundation just before Cairo in 1994, and we both were at Cairo. And of course, we also both were at Beijing. So we come a long way. And I think that for me, these are very important relationships in terms of not only understanding people, but understanding context. And I could easily write a story about India just from my interaction with Poonam alone. Now, I also want, of course, to thank her for the work she does with the foundation. on an everyday basis to realize G.R.D. Tata's vision, which at its heart is about ensuring dignity and choice for women and girls, the subject they have asked me to speak about today. Last year, 2014, the world marked 20 years since the historic Cairo International Conference on Population and Development. Historic because it was at this time that the world endorsed a human rights-based approach to population and development, an approach based on the realization of dignity and choice for everyone, and particularly for women and girls. I think it's important to also understand where we were coming from. Before then, we had several issues about targets and about demographic targets in places and in countries around the world where family planning was introduced and was practiced. So now transforming it and trying to now ensure that we gave the choice to the individual. And we also did commit ourselves as an international community to respect that individual's right to make that choice. It was very, very important thing. And I think that that's what has driven the change that I'm going to talk to as I go through this lecture. And I think that, of course, is the basis of talking to dignity and the rights of people. The Cairo Program of Action marked a shift in focus from human numbers to quality of human lives, particularly ensuring universal access to sexual and reproductive health and the realization of reproductive rights. In Cairo, delegates from all regions and cultures recognized that empowering women and girls and enabling them to make informed choices about their bodies and their lives is both the rights, and I mean rights in the rights perspective, rights thing to do, and the basis for individual well-being and sustainable development. So Cairo actually spoke to sustainable development before the rest of the world caught on to it. The delegation from India, with members of both civil society and government, was an important player in achieving this forward-looking consensus. A year later in Beijing, world leaders reaffirmed that women's rights are human rights and committed themselves to developing the fullest potential of girls and women and ensuring that their full and equal participation in decision-making and in the development process. The 20-year reviews of both Cairo and Beijing agendas show that we have made considerable progress over the last 2 decades. They also show that we still have a long way to go to ensure dignity and choice for all, to achieve gender equality, and to realize Mr. Tata's dream and the vision that all of us, civil society, governments, agreed to in Cairo and Beijing. Today I'd like to talk about some of the findings of the Cairo Beyond 2014 review and to illustrate our progress, but also point to some of the challenges and opportunities both in India and globally for the realization and dignity of human rights, which are the foundations for a resilient, sustainable future. The results of the ICPD review, which is the Cairo agenda, reveal substantial gains over the past 2 decades since we gathered in Cairo. Today, nearly 1 billion people have been lifted out of poverty. A majority of countries have achieved gender parity in primary education. But primary education is not good enough. Maternal mortality has declined by almost half, and all of this has happened in the context of a 23% decline in global fertility, driven by greater choices for women around the world, including greater access to sexual and reproductive health services. But progress has been unequal. Growing inequalities are leaving vast numbers of people behind, particularly the poorest and most marginalized. In the meeting we just held, we actually spoke to the issues of how do we ensure that services get to the most hard to reach. And I think it's an important piece as we go along to talk about the next development agenda if we're going to be inclusive and leave no one behind. In the poorest communities, women's status, maternal death, child marriage, and many of the concerns that we all addressed in Cairo have seen little progress over the last 2 decades. So we still see quite a number of these happening in many countries around the world. Today, around 800 women will have died or will die giving life. Even though we know what to do and we know how to do it, we know how to prevent that, I don't think we're doing enough to ensure that we prevent it. In a number of countries, the rights and the autonomy of women and girls are deliberately curtailed. And in no country are women fully equal in political, social, and economic power. I mean, in the United States, there are figures which range from 49 cents to 60 cents as what women earn as to the dollar that the man earns. So it's a global problem and it's everywhere. Women's rising educational levels and participation in the workforce have not matched with equal prospects for advancement and equal pay. I just spoke to that. Women remain underrepresented in leadership positions, both in politics and the private sector. I read a Financial Times review once about 3-4 months ago, which showed that of the 360 companies that are quoted on the FTSE, only 14 of them are led by women. And it just tells you where that is. Now, the article went further to actually do a deep dive and showed that when you look at women and men going to university, it's actually more women go to university in the UK. When they graduate, more women graduate than men. When they go to work, you actually find equal representation, the first cut of going to work. Now, as they progress, the women just drop off. And so by the time we now took the count of who is leading where, only 14 out of 360 actually are women. And that tells a story. Tells a story, and the story also speaks to how we value women and how we value what they do for society, especially in propagation of our heritage and our survival. Women go and bear children, but in bearing children, they are punished for it. So they never come back to the same place or advance in their career. They have to suffer it, whereas men just continue. So I think we have to reverse roles and make the men pregnant the next time around. Everywhere, violence against women and girls continue to take a devastating toll. Marriage under the age of 18 is illegal in 158 countries, yet 1 in 3 girls in developing countries is married before the age of 18. And married too early, as you know, leads to pregnancy too soon, effectively closing the door to education and other opportunities for a better life. Other problems have arisen, such as dramatic decline in sex ratios at birth in several countries. And countries in the East, South, and Central Asia, and Eastern Europe. India also has that issue, which we need to address. And fertility decline cannot be at the cost of our daughters. We have to ensure representation, and we have to allow nature to do its work. Adolescent girls are particularly at risk in the poorest communities. Most girls are finishing primary school, but they are facing challenges in accessing and completing secondary education. I actually went to an African country the other day where when you look at the attendance at primary school, there is parity between boys and girls. But when you take the toll and you look at going forward, only 3% of the girls who finish primary school go to secondary education. And that in itself, I think it's a violation of their rights to start with. But what happens to them is what, in fact, is more important. They then get married off, and they disappear from the statistic. We don't know what happens to those girls. Many of them actually die trying to give life. So supporting their aspirations and the aspiration of all young people is key to sustainable development. And we have to ensure that we all commit to this. We need to ensure that the most marginalized women and adults and girls are afforded choices that enable them to lead dignified life, productive lives, not the least the choice to plan the number, timing and spacing of the children, which I believe is a basic right of each individual. We know that access to comprehensive reproductive health services, including voluntary family planning, saves lives, protects women's health, and helps unleash the power of women to contribute to their societies and drive sustainable social and economic growth. But as we speak, 225 million women living in the developing world want to avoid pregnancy but are not using modern contraception. Now, when you look at the cost of providing for them, it's a scandal that the world waits and looks at that happening to all of us. The last report we had with the Guttmacher Institute looking at the cost of providing reproductive health services actually says that for $25, we can do the following. We can do testing and counseling for HIV. We can provide antenatal services for women who are pregnant. We can provide skilled attendance at birth. We can provide family planning, and all of that for $25 per capita. It is the cost of going to watch a movie in the United States and buying some popcorn. I think that it is scandalous that the world looks away from that and does not make that investment, because what we need in order to scale up to ensure that we can do it is actually about $39 billion US, which is so much less than what we spend on other things, which I will not even go into here. So we have to respect the status of women, and yet women are a crucial part of the workforce in India, representing close to a third of the active labor force. This is lower than in China, which is 82%, and Brazil, 72%, but still significant and crucial to the fiscal security of millions of families in this country. Yet, there are challenges to the dignity and safety of women within the labor force as well. The majority of women work in the informal sector with low wages, limited security, and no benefits. Most are unskilled, reflecting low levels of education. And in 2010, an estimated 65% of working-age women in rural India lack primary education, primary school education. India is, at this point in time, on the cusp of having a large working-age population with fewer dependents. And I think that we should, I want to underscore it again, India must make the investments to ensure that they can have the opportunities that this will go. I know that India has outlined a strong commitment to capitalizing on this potential dividend through skills development and partnerships across the private sector, the whole promise for millions of young workers. But we have to ensure that rights and the dignity of people are protected in every circumstance. rights and the freedom of women, their dignity and choice, must be part of the formula for India to succeed. We at UNFPA are encouraged by the prominent attention the government has given to ending the gender discriminatory practice of sex selection and for providing economic incentives to saving India's girls through the government's, I have to be careful here, Beti Bachao, Beti Padao program and other initiatives. Now, Prime Minister Modi has spoken passionately and publicly about the scourge of violence against women and the discriminatory attitudes that encourage it. It is notable that the government of India has mandated a health sector response to sexual assault and violence. And we have noticed that the legal system has also responded in equally. It's equally important that the health sector and the health personnel be sensitive to the causes and consequences of gender-based violence and tackle this not only as a health issue, but as a human rights issue. This will make for a powerful addition to India's reproductive, maternal, newborn, child, and adolescent health program because domestic and other forms of violence against women greatly affect reproductive health outcomes. So, as we embark on an ambitious post-2015 development agenda, as a successor to the Millennium Development Goals, we have 59 million chances to do it right, to catalyze the dramatic transformation they and we so desperately need. We know we can achieve this with the right investments to our young people. Education, including comprehensive sexuality education, is one of the best investments countries can make. If we enable girls' birth to be welcomed in the same way as our brothers, if we keep girls in school and out of marriage, if we give them access to information and services they need to avoid motherhood in childhood, if we protect them from violence and harmful practices, if we equip them and their brothers equally with skills and opportunities to participate in the workforce and in decision-making, they will transform their communities, India, and the world. The formula is very simple. Let us empower, let us educate, let us employ. The time is now. I thank you.